I must check for any place a person can hide during a fire drill. Okay. Let's see how that works out for you. Background. I worked in a building where I was a fire marshal. No extra money and a small amount of extra work, but someone has to do it. I was also first aider and somehow got landed with arranging the Christmas night out, so maybe the building manager saw me as an easy mark. The only advantage that I had was that during a drill or real event I had absolute power. Anyone not following an evacuation order swiftly was called up for disciplinary action. We had random drills, about 12 per year. My job was to ensure that the building was clear, basically pop my head in each office space, toilets, kitchens etc. and see that nobody was there, and then take a register outside. 5 minutes tops. Anyone booked into the building that was not registered by me was in trouble. The drills were sprung on me as well as the building manager had the fire alarm keys, and it made it a more realistic test. The building manager was a dick. He wielded his small amount of power as much as he could and loved to report people for tiny infractions. During one drill he hid in a cupboard and then called me into his office for failing to ensure that the building was clear. Apparently some people may run and hide from a fire instead of leaving the building. I got a wagging finger and told to do better next time or I would lose the marshal role. My job was pretty safe since nobody actually wanted to take over, and after hearing the story of me getting into trouble they absolutely did not want the job. The building manager changed the fire marshal process instruction to include checking hiding places. This is a site instruction. He had no power to do so, I later found out. Malicious compliance begins. The alarm went off, the first after my failure to check cupboards. Everyone left, crossed the road and stood in the assembly point in, and this is very important, the rain and wind. I searched the top floor very carefully, opening up large cupboards, opening up boxes large enough to hide a person, looking under each desk in case someone was hiding. First floor ditto. UK, so our first floor is US second and our ground is US first. By now people were cold and wet and unhappy, but building manager refused to let them enter. He knew that it was coming, he was well prepared for the weather. Most people had light clothing on as the car park stood next to the building. They don't bother with coats in the 20-feet trip from car to building. Ground floor checked everywhere, and finally the basement where the boiler lives and is a general dumping ground for old files and junk. That took ages, but I was thorough. Very thorough. And slow. Thorough slow, not taking the piss slow. I left the building, took the register, and a mass of sodden people headed back into the building. I was massively unpopular until I showed them the pie that said I had to check all spaces that someone could hide. They knew what happened at the last test and directed all the anger at building manager. It was the equivalent of the angry villagers turning up at Castle Frankenstein with torches and pitchforks. Some people were furious at him. One of the office staff was a union rep and reported him to the site safety officer, who went ballistic at him, telling me to remain in a potentially burning building longer than necessary, and a number of people went home to get dry clothes and the company had to give them special leave to do so, or else the union would have to get involved. He got shit from all sides: workers, union, management and site safety officer. Most of the time nothing gets done when it is just you complaining, but it really gets done when the correct people are inconvenienced. Sweep the side alley until it's spotless. You got it, boss. A couple of summers ago, I took a part-time job as a server at a local pub, restaurant. I had a full-time job, so this was just for experience and to pick up some tip money on the side. The pub had been closed for a few years after the old owner couldn't afford it anymore, so when the new owners picked it up and got it ready for opening again, the town was pretty excited. It's a bit of a town landmark, right in the middle of our main street. I applied as soon as I found out, and ended up getting hired. I was one of the younger servers, alongside a few older ones. Most of us were women, and the older servers really looked out for us inexperienced ones. Overall, the others on the team were really nice, save for a couple of nasty ones. My new boss Gary, not his actual name, was, well, not as great. Gary's favorite saying was, if you have time to lean, you have time to clean. He thought if we took even a second to catch our breaths, he was losing money from us slacking off. On slow days, he would find menial, pointless tasks for us to complete: wipe the bar counter, even though it's been wiped 3x in the past half hour already; reorganize the menus, even though they're already perfectly organized; fill up more condiment cups, even though there's already 50 salsa cups ready to go. Stuff like that. The most tedious task, especially in the early months of the summer, was sweeping the side alley that leads to the patio. There were these massive maple trees along the path, and they would drop leaves and seeds like crazy, especially on windy days. One afternoon in early June, there were only a handful of us working. It gets slow, and I get assigned the sweeping task. I sweep up the back alleyway as much as I can, but the wind is blowing and the trees just keep dumping more and more seeds onto the path. I do my best, until a co-worker calls me back inside to help serve tables. She didn't want me missing out on tips, bless her. I seat the table, get their orders, and start entering them in. Just then, Gary storms up to me. "Gary, what are you doing?" Me. "Entering table 15's order." "Why?" "Gary, the side alley is a mess. I don't pay you to slack off." Me. "I swept up as much as I could before this table walked in. It's a really windy day, that's why it keeps getting full of leaves and seeds. You're more than welcome to check the compost bin for how much I actually did sweep up." Gary, "No. We don't finish things halfway here. You're going back out there and finishing your job. I want it to be spotless." Linda, not her real name, can take table 15. Gary then switched table 15 from my account to Linda, an older server's account. Linda and I got along great. She worked as both a server and a bartender, and used to be a general manager with another restaurant chain. She decided to join this team after her retirement as a part-time hobby. She taught me a whole lot while I worked there, and I'm grateful to have met her. Linda, I'll hang on to your share of the tips. Best not to make Gary angry. Me. He really wants me to make it spotless. Does he know how impossible that is? I'd have to be out there all shift. That's when Linda gave me a smile, and the light bulb turned on in my head. I still had 2 hours left in my shift, and it was going to be right into dinner rush. I grabbed the broom and dustpan, and got to work. I would sweep as much as I could. But every so often, another strong breeze would come by and hundreds more helicopter seeds would flutter to the ground. I kept going. At this point, it started to get busier. A lineup soon began to form out the door. Linda was taking care of tables, but very soon it became clear that the other servers needed someone else to deal with everyone. Linda let them know what was up, and most of them, who tolerated Gary at best and hated him at worst, understood. I kept on sweeping. Like Sisyphus and the boulder, the task was never ending. I scooped up pile after pile of leaves and seeds, to no avail. After 45 minutes or so, the side door opened suddenly, to reveal a red-faced Gary. "Gary, why aren't you in there serving customers?" Me, gestures at the alleyway. As if the gods themselves had heard the malicious compliance brewing, another strong breeze shook more seeds onto the partially cleared alley, right in front of Gary's face. The look on his face was priceless. He told me, in a quieter voice, to get back inside and start taking orders. I handed the broom off to him, and he began to sweep. And sweep. And sweep. The other servers and I had a good laugh about it inside, and I managed to make decent tips that night. Gary realized he couldn't exactly fire me for following his orders perfectly, and ended up being more relaxed about the side alley. No one really cares about some leaves and seeds on the ground, so long as they're not obstructing anyone. I ended up working there for the rest of the summer before quitting. I hear the pub had to be passed on to new owners after Gary's disorganization got the better of him. My next shift, I found a broken broom in the garbage. I'd like to think it was the work of Gary, red in the face and exhausted from battling against Mother Nature.